Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are. Thanks for stopping by again. A couple of things to mention tonight. One is in response to a question I get asked from time to time, and I will take a moment here just to mention it, and that is how many people live in Panama City. Now that doesn't seem to be an important issue to most of you, may not think so, but in fact, the city's population is given at levels from 400,000 to 2 million, depending on where you're looking, at various sources on the internet. I don't blame people for being confused because there's quite a difference in most people's experience, I think certainly mine, between a city of 400,000 and a city of 2 million. So what are we really talking about here? And the answer to that is is detailed, and you're not going to hear all the details because you don't care. But the old set city of Panama that has its boundaries have not changed in ages. That has about 430,000 people living in it in 2010. In the 20 years prior to that, from 1990 through 2010, it only grew total population by 4% over 20 years. But it's surrounded by the District of Panama. Now, the district includes the city, but it includes a wide area outside the city as well. And their population there, in that same 20-year period, went up 162%. So when you add their 450,000 to the 430 in the city, you get 880. Now, you'll see that figure in some areas. Then there is San Miguelito, which is another city and district itself, which might, for all practical purposes, looks like it should be part of Panama City, but it isn't. And you're pushing up now to about 1.2 million. This is all 2010 numbers. So add 25% on, perhaps, for the last 10 years when we have we finally have our census again next year. If you go across the canal, now those numbers I'm talking about, that's this side of the canal, so to speak, the eastern side. You go across the canal, and there are hundreds of thousands of people who live there, and they certainly are part of the metro area of the city. So long story short, when I did my estimates of the metro area, I did it from a fairly simple approach to it, which would indicate probably now a population in the neighborhood of about 2.1 million. But there is an official definition of exactly what the metropolitan area is here in Panama City, and I expect it will be in the neighborhood of 2.3 to 2.4 million next year. So the answer to the question is that the city itself is a little over 400,000, but that's meaningless. It's just lines on a map. It is an urban agglomeration of about 2 to 2.4 million people. They don't all live in one small area. It's a big city, and much bigger than most people realize when they come. Yet most of us who are expats and don't have, by virtue of our kids in school or our offices where we work or whatever, we end up living in the center city area, roughly, where the 430,000 live, because it's just near everything. And it's very convenient, and you don't need to have your own car and drive it. And there's a whole variety of reasons why so many of us live down in this particular area. Okay, so that's to be enough for population. Think 2 million and you're safe. Another thing, yes, I did get a question, and there are always new people coming in. So I do a report from Panama, and I just did one just a couple weeks ago, and I will put the address down below. It's at the website, and you can go right in and download it if you want to. It's the first one I've done in 2 years. If the spirit really moves me, I may do a second one near the end of this year. They're pretty detailed, and they really talk about a lot of things that you won't read anywhere else. And it's not like secrets, it's just a matter that most people don't do the research necessary to be able to share with you much more than opinions and something they read somewhere. That sort of thing. So if you're interested in that, it is free, and I'll give you the address below. And then finally, I just wanted to point out something. I've been talking a lot in the report and here that real estate prices, both for sale and for rentals, are much lower, and we're going through a period particularly noticeable here in the city where things are lower. It costs less money, radically so. In some areas, the super expensive homes, forget it. But otherwise, they are definitely lower. and price, and it's a great time to buy, it's a great time to rent. And part of the reason for this, as I explained in my report, and has been referred to many times here in the press, is that the advertising for the country was very limited in the last 5 years of the last administration, which just left office and a new one has just been sworn in. I realized that, but I'd never seen the statistics. They hadn't been presented. So they were recently, because what's going on right now is this new administration is doing a complete review of the financial situation of the country. And of course, there's a lot of politics involved with that. But that's not my concern now. What really surprised me was that and I'm just going to show you the stats right here, up here on the screen. In that first administration, which is 2004 to 2009, they spent more in 1 year than in an average year than the last administration, which is the third one showing up there, spent for the entire 5 years. And the second administration, the one in the middle, they spent on average more in less than 6 months than the last administration spent in 5 years. I was really stunned. I had no idea that the difference had been so dramatic. And honestly, you can't do that and expect people to keep rolling in. You need to continually remind people that you exist, and there's a lot of competition out there, and we're a small country and people don't always think of us, and so on. So for tourism or for relocators or whatever, you got to compete. That's all there is to it. I know that the last administration was very determined to get some very important projects to him, to get them underway in education and some other areas, and I appreciate that. But he took money from other parts of the budget, and advertising got really hit, and that's a huge mistake. It's one of the reasons, just one, but one of several, that has led to this sort of growth recession, I called it in the report, where and overall we're growing, but at another level we're not. We're in a recession, and it's been created by our own actions. It's nothing that's shocking or whatever, and we can and will turn it around, but it's going to take a little time to do that, and it is underway. And some stats coming out now indicate that at least we seem to have bottomed out, and we're going to come back out of this. I'm not worried about that. We're already still one of the fastest growing in Latin America. We don't bother comparing ourselves to the rest of Latin American nations. Basically, if we're going to compare ourselves to anybody, we'll look to other nations that are much more dramatic, growing much more quickly than the average. Somebody like an Asian nation like Singapore, for example, which has always been a nation that Panama has a great deal of respect for. So anyhow, now you've seen it. Now you understand why hotels and everybody else have been so disturbed about the lack of advertising. A factor, though, that helps you, because it's part of the reason why now is you have this opportunity to buy and to rent less expensively than you could have 2 years or 3 years ago, certainly 5 years ago, very definitely so. And that's wonderful for you, for the people who have places to rent or places to sell. It's not such a happy time. But that's not your problem. So be thankful for the blessing that's coming your way. We will turn that around, but for the moment, it's pretty good down here in that one respect. And I'll keep you posted on how things go with the economy. It's not going to turn around 180 degrees in 1 month, but it will turn. It has good reason to. So I'll be back to you again soon. We'll talk a little bit more about some other specific items, and I have a couple more questions that I want to answer. But that will be enough for this evening. Have a good one.